Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started. Today, we're taking a massive leap into the future of flight.
Specifically for uncrewed aircraft systems.
Sure.
We are looking at this foundational shift that's happening right now. One that, it completely changes the nature of what it means to be a pilot.
That's absolutely right. We're moving past that Part 107 world, the era of the hands-on pilot, the one making constant stick and rudder corrections.
The joystick pilot.
The joystick pilot, exactly. That world is being replaced by the highly automated system, which requires something totally different, what we're starting to call the mission brain.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our focus today is laser sharp. We want to understand the critical trade-offs, the new operational roles, and the skills that are defined by the FAA's proposed Part 108 framework.
For beyond visual line of sight or BVLOS operations.
Right. And this isn't just about getting drones to fly farther. This is a fundamental regulatory shift where it seems the FAA is betting heavily on automation to deliver safety at scale.
They are.
So our mission for this deep dive is to go past what automation does and really dig into what it demands. Demands from the human operator, from the technology, and from the entire organization that's supporting them.
And for you, the listener who's preparing for this future, the key context here is, it's monumental. The proposed Part 108 mandate leans completely into high automation and what the FAA is calling simplified user interaction, or SUI.
SUI.
And the regulatory finding that supports this is unambiguous. Direct manual control, so we're talking traditional joysticks, handheld RC controllers, stick flying, that would not be permitted for these operations.
Wow. Okay. So that is the core philosophical break from the past, and it's critical to understand. If you were a Part 107 manual flyer today, this is no longer about your stick skills.
Not at all.
It's about systems management. The interaction is strictly mediated through these automated control systems. So you, as the, what are they calling it, the flight coordinator.
The flight coordinator, yes.
You aren't executing the turns, you're just issuing simple high-level commands like go to this new altitude or fly this new heading, and the system does all the complex stuff.
All the flight physics, the energy management, it's all handled internally.
Exactly. This abstraction of the physics-moving control from a kinetic action to a conceptual intent, that seems to be the necessary prerequisite for the whole safety case, for scaling BVLOS.
It is, and we have to fully understand why the regulator is prioritizing this core automation bet before we can even get to the inherent risks that it creates.
Right. So let's start there with the powerful motivation. Why this massive near-total reliance on autonomy? It seems a little counterintuitive to remove the human's ability to just grab the controls instantly.
It does on the surface, but the FAA's central thesis is that properly engineered automation, and that's the key, properly engineered, it dramatically reduces overall human workload. And most importantly, it eliminates the high-frequency, low-consequence errors that, frankly, plague manual operations.
So the regulatory focus completely shifts. Instead of worrying about a pilot's shaky thumb, they're worrying about the system's integrity.
Precisely. It means the system must be designed to maintain control. It has to be resilient, even when external services like GTS or, the C2 link starts to degrade.
And it has to have a guaranteed ability to, discontinue the flight safely?
To discontinue the flight safely when required without creating a new hazard. That's the bar.
And that expectation of, highly complex, resilient automation, it forces a complete restructuring of the human roles. We're not just retitling the role pilot in command, the RPIC.
Oh, not even close.
Part 108 proposes two extremely distinct functional roles that demand, radically different skill sets.
And that functional separation is absolutely essential for managing the sheer complexity of fleet operations. It has to be separate.
So what's the first one?
First, you have the operations supervisor. This person is the high-level corporate safety and operations authority. You should think of this person as the director of ops or the chief pilot.
But with a twist.
A big twist. Their focus is on policy, procedure, and governance. They are responsible for the organizational policy, for ensuring procedural adherence, and for maintaining high-level compliance across the entire fleet.
They never touch the flight controls.
Never. They set the rules for the game.
So their cognitive load is entirely strategic. Things like fleet maintenance schedules, software update rollouts, training standards, regulatory compliance audits. That's a fundamentally different job.
Exactly. Their whole focus is on preventing those systemic high-consequence failures through policy and good governance.
Okay, so that's the strategic layer. Then who's flying the mission?
Then you have the flight coordinator. This is the person executing the flight mission. And this role completely swaps that Part 107 manual flying for a supervisory and a mission management mindset.
So they're tactical.
They're tactical. They issue those simple commands through the automated systems. They're monitoring the health of the system. And they're only intervening when the system hits some operational limit or encounters an exception.
So this functional separation, this is the secret sauce for scaling up.
It has to be.
By removing the need for the coordinator to constantly handle kinetic tasks, heading, altitude, pitch, you free up a massive amount of cognitive capacity.
And that leads directly to the core retention hook here. Automation is how you graduate from being a pilot with hands to being a mission brain.
I like that.
You aren't wasting your mental energy fighting the physics of flight anymore. You are managing the boundaries, the intent, and the health of the system.
Which brings us to the foundation of scalability. The one-many concept. We've heard this buzzword for years, but tell us how the removal of those micro-corrections explicitly enables one human to supervise more than one aircraft. What's the practical mechanism?
The practical mechanism is time. It's really that simple. In manual flight, your mental clock is dictated by the aircraft's stability. If you take your hands off the sticks, even the most stable aircraft will eventually drift off its heading, its altitude, or speed.
Of course.
So in Part 107, you spend, 90% of your cognitive capacity just on those microcorrections, just maintaining flight integrity.
Right. Now, in a high automation L4 system.
In an L4 system, the aircraft always maintains its assigned parameters. It doesn't matter if there's turbulence or minor wind changes, because the automation is handling that feedback loop continuously, milliseconds by millisecond.
So the flight coordinator's time is now spent not on flying,
but on scanning and monitoring. If they have, say, 30 seconds of free, structured scan time available per minute, they can now split that time across multiple aircraft, issuing high-level checks and simple commands rather than constant inputs.
We've effectively weaponized the human supervisory time. Beyond just the scalability, let's list the top ways that automation actually delivers value and improves safety. Because this isn't just a business efficiency play.
No, not at all. The primary safety driver is workload reduction and consistency. Think about a utility inspection. If you need to inspect 50 miles in power line, you need the same image angle, the exact same altitude relative to the line, and the same speed every single time, regardless of wind gusts.
A human can't do that perfectly for hours on end.
A human simply cannot achieve that level of precision and consistency. Automation ensures that repeatability, which drastically lowers the error rate in the data collection and then, of course, in the analysis later.
And that immediately addresses the idea of reducing human error. Where does automation target errors most effectively?
It really targets those high-frequency operational errors. Inconsistent stick skills, fatigue that leads to poor scanning discipline, distraction, or just misjudging wind compensation.
The simple stuff that adds up.
The simple stuff that adds up. By using SUI, that simplified user interaction, we move past the error-prone process of fine motor control and replace it with a conceptual command.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of trying to hold a perfect hover in a high crosswind, which is incredibly demanding, the flight coordinator just issues the command hold position, and the system manages all the complex dynamic compensation required. It completely eliminates the human's physical execution error.
It's like moving from, piloting a fighter jet with pure stick inputs to supervising a commercial airliner using the flight management system.
That's a perfect analogy. The cognitive demand shifts entirely from execution to management.
And that focus on management is enabled by built-in guardrails, or what we call envelope protection. This feels like a non-negotiable for BVLOS.
Oh, absolutely. The flight envelope is your cage guard. A certified Part 108 system must be engineered to resist operation outside of its predefined safe envelope.
So if I, as the flight coordinator, tell it to do something stupid,
it should say no. If you input a command for a descent rate that is structurally unsafe for the current airspeed, the automation must reject that command. Or, and this is more complex, it must execute the descent at the maximum safe rate without violating the limits. This prevents the human from issuing a command that inadvertently results in a catastrophic failure, which is a massive safety win when the aircraft is miles away and completely out of sight.
And when a failure does happen, the idea is that the machine is required to be faster and more predictable than a human under stress.
This is the core argument for faster, consistent failure responses. Human reaction time, especially the time you need to detect, then diagnose, then decide under pressure, it's measured in seconds. At best, automated systems execute their pre-planned contingencies in milliseconds. Part 108 acknowledges this by demanding specific, predictable, safe behaviors. Things like executing a predetermined action at link timeout, like a return to home, a loiter, or a safe landing.
And it has to be able to discontinue the flight safely.
Right, without creating a new hazard. When a system failure hits, what you want is predictable machine logic, not a stressed human who is trying to improvise.
And finally, this entire structure-high automation, simple commands is what enables the future vision of enabling system-to-system integration. And this is where we need to briefly talk about Part 146.
Right. If BVLOS is ever going to scale to fleets of hundreds or even thousands of aircraft, human coordination just cannot be the bottleneck.
It's impossible.
Impossible. Automation is the crucial glue. It allows the aircraft to consistently feed reliable, high-integrity telemetry data into these automated data services. And that's the regulatory framework that's hinted at by the Part 146 concepts. These services perform strategic deconfliction, conformance monitoring, and dynamic airspace management.
Hold on, let's clarify that for the listener. What is the real difference between this and, say, traditional air traffic control?
Well, traditionally, ATC is primarily human-centric. It relies on voice communication and radar data for, relatively low-volume separation of aircraft.
Okay.
Part 146 and the underlying automation demand for BVLOS are built on the premise of high-volume, low-latency data exchange. We're literally talking about machines talking to machines.
So fleets scale on data and rules, not on voice calls and eyeballs.
Exactly. Fleets scale successfully only if the aircraft's automation is reliable enough to conform to these pre-negotiated rule sets. That allows centralized services to manage risk based on data, not on human-to-human coordination. The scale of operations simply demands machine governance.
Okay, here's where we turn the conversation. We've established that high automation is a required engine for scalability and for consistency. But automation is not inherently safer.
No, it's not.
It merely trades old, well-understood risks, like inconsistent stick skills, for new and often more catastrophic systemic risks.
This is the sharp edge of the deal. It's the other side of the coin. When we shift the human from being in the active control loop to being in the supervisory loop, we introduce a whole host of new cognitive and system-level failure modes.
And if you don't train against these,
your highly automated operation is fundamentally fragile.
Okay, so let's define the 4 most common ways that humans fail to supervise these automated systems effectively. Start with what the source material called the #1 killer of automation confidence.
That is unequivocally mode confusion. It happens when the operator thinks the system is operating under mode X, let's say, a simple flight plan following mode.
Right, just follow the line on the map.
Exactly. But the aircraft, based on its own internal logic tree, has actually shifted into mode Y, like wind compensation override or contingency return to base.
So the system's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
It's behaving perfectly rationally, according to its internal programming, but the human misunderstands the active state or intent, and this leads to the perception that the machine is just acting on its own.
And the more complex the system gets, the more modes it has, the more training is needed just to make sure that mode awareness is instantaneous. So this suggests SUI isn't just about simple inputs, it's also about simple, clear state reporting.
Oh, absolutely. Clear state reporting is paramount. And paired with this is automation surprise.
Okay, how is that different from mode confusion?
While mode confusion is about misunderstanding the current state, surprise is about an unexpected transition in behavior. The system suddenly executes a sharp turn, often because of a hidden trigger.
Like what?
Like a geofence logic it just encountered, or a wind shift that exceeded a certain tolerance threshold, or a sudden, non-visualized contingency activation. The human didn't see the input data change, so the machine's resulting action is a total shock.
So, surprise is what happens when the machine has processed some critical information, that the human hasn't prioritized or maybe hasn't even seen yet.
Exactly. It highlights a failure, either a sensor failure or a logic failure in the human-machine interface itself.
Okay, third is the insidious risk of complacency and skill fade.
This is a tough one. When the system reliably handles 99.9% of routine operations perfectly, the human mind naturally just monitors less actively.
It's just psychological. We get comfortable.
Then when that 0.1% emergency hits, the human's ability to detect the anomaly, diagnose the cause, and recall the muscle memory for that abnormal operation is severely degraded.
The supervision is not passive watching.
It can't be. It must be an active procedural behavior. If you don't train emergency intervention, that capability decays incredibly rapidly.
And finally, there's automation bias. This is the tendency for us to overly trust the machine's assertion of safety, even when other evidence contradicts it.
This is a deep psychological challenge for operators of any highly reliable system. You raised a great point in the notes about this. If the system is designed with mandated resilience, shouldn't we trust it?
Right, it feels like we should.
And the answer is yes, until the moment it contradicts reality. Automation bias is accepting a GPS OK alert when the aircraft's telemetry history is showing erratic behavior, or, overriding your gut feeling because the central system dashboard is still showing all green.
So training must instill the critical judgment to question the machine.
To question the machine, particularly when external environmental data suggests something is off.
How do you even train that balance? How do you teach someone to trust a system that is 99.9% perfect, but be ready to distrust it in the one moment that matters most?
That's the key question. You don't train distrust. You train critical cross-check. The procedure must mandate checking external data weather, NOTAMs, traffic feeds against the onboard system health report.
You're creating a verification loop.
Exactly. And furthermore, the training must focus on diagnosing partial failures, where the system is degraded, not totally failed. If the machine reports green, but the latency on the C2 link is spiking, the human has to be trained to recognize that trend as a precursor to failure.
And override the green status with a proactive intervention.
You're managing trends, not just statuses. And beyond the human element, automation introduces these deep systemic vulnerabilities, especially when you have fleets of aircraft involved.
Let's tackle brittleness. Outside the ODD, the operational design domain, what happens when the real world doesn't conform to the software specifications?
Automation thrives on predictability. It's built for that. It handles typical expected scenarios, a steady 15-knot headwind, known traffic patterns brilliantly. But it fails, and it can fail badly against edge cases.
What's an edge case in this context?
Imagine an unexpected, hyper-localized microweather event, like a sudden thermal updraft that wasn't captured by the regional weather model, or maybe an electromagnetic interference source that's generating intermittent, unusual RF noise.
Things the system was never trained on.
Right. Since the system was not trained or designed to handle that specific complex input, the results can be catastrophic, unpredictable oscillation, sensor conflict, or even an emergency mode activation when none is actually warranted.
It's the difference between flying in sunny, defined air and suddenly hitting an anomaly that the training data never accounted for. It's like your phone's autocorrect failing when you type technical jargon.
That's a great way to put it. The automated drone fails when it encounters a physical anomaly that's outside its programmed reality.
And that fragility is compounded by the risk of silent degradation. This is, to me, perhaps the most terrifying concept in BVLOS because the degradation happens invisibly.
It is terrifying. The latency on the C2 link slowly creeps up from 100 milliseconds to 500. The GNSS confidence drops from 10 satellites to 6. The battery performance dips just below the predicted thermal model margin.
And the system stays green the whole time.
It stays green because it hasn't hit the hard fail threshold yet. But the safety margin is just shrinking and shrinking. The danger is that the flight coordinator is waiting for the loud red alarm, but by that point, the time to unsafe has shrunk too much for a successful human intervention.
This sounds like an organizational failure masquerading as a technical problem.
It often is. It's an organizational failure to monitor trends. If your procedure only dictates action when the C2 link is lost, you have already failed.
The procedure needs to be more proactive.
The procedure must dictate action when the C2 link quality trends down by 20% in 5 minutes, forcing proactive mitigation before the failure happens.
And when you multiply that fragile automation across an entire fleet, you get fleet coupling or systemic risk.
And this is the massive scalability challenge. In the legacy aviation world, a pilot error or a single airframe component failure results in one incident, one plane, one problem. In a highly coupled Part 108 fleet, where every aircraft is running the same software, relying on the same cloud beta service, using the same configuration files, a single bug, a bad map update, or a misconfigured geofence can simultaneously affect every single aircraft in the sky.
So it means governance, things like change control, it shifts from being a compliance measure to being a direct flight safety control.
Absolutely. The organization's change control process, the rigorous testing, the staging, the deployment monitoring of software updates and config changes is now the single most important safety barrier against a mass catastrophic failure.
And if the operations supervisor doesn't have rigorous control over software versioning and rollout,
the risk of a fleet-wide grounding event, or worse, a fleet-wide accident, it skyrockets.
we also have to address external dependency fragility. BVLOS relies on so many services outside the airframe itself.
It does. The reliance on external services, GNSS, traffic feeds, cellular or satellite C2 links, it introduces vulnerabilities that you cannot directly control.
So what does the FAA say about that?
The FAA's proposal is actually highly specific here. It demands that the UA must not lose control due to the degradation or even the non-availability of these services.
So that's a crucial design mandate.
It is. The aircraft has to retain full control, authority, and the ability to execute a safe contingency, even if the entire external support infrastructure just vanishes. Your safety model has to be resilient to global infrastructure failure.
And finally, the modern threat. Cybersecurity as a flight safety hazard. In the past, this was mostly about data theft. Now it's about kinetic risk.
When you remove the fallback of visual line of sight and manual control, a cyber event becomes an immediate operational hazard. If your ground control station is compromised, false commands, false telemetry, or a complete loss of control link caused by a denial of service attack.
It translates instantly into an uncontrolled BVLOS flight.
Instantly. And the Part 108 proposal explicitly emphasizes that operators must have robust cyber policies and processes, because the integrity of the automation and therefore flight safety is directly dependent on system security.
Okay, we've established the bargain and the trade-offs. Now let's define the human-specific responsibility within this high automation environment. We need a clear framework for how we classify the level of autonomy and how that determines the job of the flight coordinator.
For that, we use the practical automation ladder, the L0 to L5 scale. It's primarily a training tool because it clearly maps to the FAA's conceptual shift toward highly automated flight and SUI. It helps define expectations.
Okay, let's review the landscape quickly, moving from traditional piloting up to full strategic management.
We can define the lower levels, L0 manual to L2 task automation, as the domain of hands flying. This is where the human is actively controlling or continuously managing mission-critical elements.
And Part 108 essentially eliminates the possibility of relying solely on these levels for BVLOS.
Right, because of the efficiency and safety requirements. The functional shift, the great transformation, really happens at L3. Exactly. L3 is supervised autonomy. We classify L3 and above as mind supervising. At L3, the system executes the mission within predefined parameters, but the human is explicitly on the loop. They are constantly monitoring and expected to intervene when the system reports that limits are being reached or an exception occurs. The human is the primary safety failsafe.
Then we get to L4, high autonomy, which seems to be the sweet spot that the Part 108 proposal is really aiming for.
It is. L4 is where the system is robust enough to handle most normal operations and a significant number of abnormal events, like a localized sensor failure or a sudden wind shift autonomously.
And the human's intervention is entirely high level.
Entirely. It's restricted to those simple commands, airspeed, altitude, heading, that are mandated by the FAA's SUI requirement. The flight coordinator sets the intent and monitors the integrity and only intervenes for strategic reasons or systemic failures.
And the regulatory ceiling is L5, full autonomy.
Right. L5 implies the system is certified to handle normal and emergency conditions entirely on its own across a defined operational domain. The FAA mentions this as a possibility.
So the flight coordinator might not even need to take consistent action.
If the safety case is overwhelmingly strong, yes. At L5, the human role shifts almost entirely to policy, oversight, and fleet risk management. Their job isn't supervising the flight, it's supervising the entire fleet's risk posture.
This latter helps us classify the machine's capability. But within those supervisory levels, L3 and L4, we need to clarify the human's decision authority. And that's the distinction between human in the loop, HITL, and human on the loop, HOTL.
And this is a matter of critical control. Human in the loop, HITL, means the human must explicitly approve or command every safety-relevant action before the system executes it.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The automation detects a perfect emergency landing site, but the human must physically click Approve Landing at Site X before the descent even begins. It preserves explicit human decision authority for those critical phases.
And human on the loop, HOTL, which you said is the core posture for scalable operations.
HOTL is the oversight posture. The automation acts on its own based on pre-programmed logic, and the human monitors and can only override or discontinue the flight.
So the system is proactively managing its own safety.
And the human is the ultimate stop button. This is crucial for scalability because you can't have a human approving every automated microcorrection across 4 or 8 aircraft at the same time. The system would just bottleneck immediately.
Why do these levels matter so much when we talk about response time? This is where the physics of safety really collides with the automation.
They determine the response time budget. When a deviation occurs, the human needs time to complete the 5 steps. Detect, diagnose, decide, act, and then confirm.
Detect, diagnose, decide, act, confirm.
Okay. If the system is designed to require human intervention, the time available for that 5-step process has to be greater than the time to unsafe, the time it takes for the problem to escalate to an unrecoverable catastrophic state.
Give us a numerical example. If a critical sensor failure means the aircraft will enter an unsafe flight regime in, say, 8 seconds, but the flight coordinator takes 10 seconds to go through that whole process and intervene, what happens?
Catastrophe. The system design is fundamentally flawed because it's relying on a human response in a domain where human response is just too slow.
So if the time to unsafe is less than the time required for that human process,
then the system must be designed with more autonomy L4 or L5 so it can execute the contingency autonomously within that 8-second window. The automation level isn't just a feature, it's a mandated safety gap closure.
Okay, so the job has fundamentally shifted to system supervision. If we acknowledge that humans are frankly inherently bad at long-duration, low-frequency monitoring, how does a flight coordinator maintain the continuous high-fidelity situational awareness required for safe, timely intervention in this new Part 108 world? We need a concrete mastery playbook.
We use 3 layers to build this playbook. First is interface design, which is what the human sees. Second is procedural discipline, which is how the human behaves. And third is organizational governance, which is how the company manages risk.
The goal is structured attention.
Moving from passive watching to active monitoring.
So layer 1, design and awareness. The human-machine interface has to actively prevent mode, confusion, and surprise. And you've got this MILHT mnemonic. Let's break that down.
Right. MILHT defines the 5 safety variables the human must know instantly at a glance.
Okay, so M is for mode. What is the system doing right now? This seems simple, but why is it so often the source of confusion?
Because systems often have dozens of submodes. The coordinator needs a clear, unambiguous indicator, often it's color-coded, showing the primary automation state. Waypoint following, loiter, or, critically, contingency return to home.
If it just says autopilot active.
If the interface displays only a generic autopilot active, mode confusion is practically guaranteed. The system has to clearly show the specific active behavioral algorithm.
Okay, next is I for intent. What is it trying to do next? This addresses the root cause of automation surprise.
Correct. Intent means predicting the machine's immediate future. If the aircraft is following a route, the UI should project its next turn and its next altitude change.
So you can see it coming.
You see it coming. If it's performing obstacle avoidance, the UI has to show the projected path deviation. If the coordinator sees the system suddenly intend a sharp climb toward a restricted altitude, they can intervene before the violation occurs. Intent awareness transforms the human from a reactive observer into a predictive manager.
Then, L for limits. What constraints are active? This seems like basic geofencing. Is there more nuance here?
There is. Limits include regulatory constraints like airspace ceilings, system constraints like maximum wind speed tolerance, and design constraints like battery margins. And crucially, the UI must show the distance to those limits.
Not just the line on the map.
Not just the line. It should show boundary is 500 feet away and closing. This allows the coordinator to manage the safety buffer, not just react when the buffer is violated.
Okay, H is for health. Link quality, navigation confidence, margins. Explain the difference between health and just a green status.
A green status is a simple binary. It's operational or it's not. Health is about margins. A C2 link at 80% strength is green, but its health might be trending down because of a weather front moving in.
So the coordinator needs to see the trend line.
The trend line and the remaining margin. For example, battery margin. 30 minutes remaining, minimum required for recovery, 20 minutes. Health demands managing the buffer, ensuring the system has ample capacity to absorb a sudden failure without compromising safety.
And finally, T is for threats. DAA status, traffic, and weather.
Threats are the dynamic external risks. In BVLOS, this means integrating detect and avoid, or DAA, data to visualize non-cooperative traffic, real-time weather alerts for icing or high winds, and temporary NOTAMs.
So the coordinator's job is to cross-check these external threats against the aircraft's current limits in health.
Precisely. For example, threat. Icing reported at 5,000 feet. Limit. Aircraft is currently at 4,800 feet. Action. Command immediate descent to 3,000 feet. It's a constant cycle of evaluation.
And the final crucial design point you mentioned, the UI should always show the predetermined action for link timeout before the link actually drops.
This is non-negotiable under the Part 108 resilience requirements. The flight coordinator has to know, if I lose the link right now, the system is programmed to execute RTH via route 2. That prior knowledge builds predictability, and it prevents the human from panicking and issuing an unnecessary conflicting command when connectivity starts to degrade.
So that's the interface. Layer 2 is procedural discipline. You've said the humans are excellent at ritual. Since continuous monitoring leads to complacency, we must structure their attention. And this is the 3330 stand discipline. How does this ritual structure the cognitive load?
This is a professional mandate for active supervision. It transforms passive observation into systematic data collection.
So what happens every 30 seconds?
Every 30 seconds, the coordinator must conduct a rapid MILHT check. Confirm mode, intent, and health. This is the tactical check. Is the aircraft still doing what I commanded? Is the C2 link stable?
And then every 3 minutes, the scan expands.
Every 3 minutes, the coordinator confirms route conformance and airspace constraints. This moves from the immediate tactical state of the aircraft to the localized operational environment. Is the aircraft where it should be on the map? Have we drifted near an alert zone?
And finally, the strategic review every 30 minutes.
Every 30 minutes, or at key mission phase changes, like transitioning from climb out to cruise or beginning the approach, they confirm the overall mission risk picture and review their escalation paths.
This is where they look for long-term trends.
Right. Is that forecast wind shift occurring sooner than expected? Should we preemptively call the mission off? This rhythm prevents the human from just drifting into complacency. It forces them to actively pull and process information at fixed intervals.
Now, when intervention is needed, the structure has to continue. And for that, we use the 3C intervention script.
The 3C script is a formal communication protocol. It's designed to replace those panicked, undisciplined inputs and prevent that frustrating feeling of, I clicked it, but I'm not really sure what happened.
So the first C, call the condition.
The coordinator must verbally, or even mentally if they're alone, state exactly what has changed. Alert. C2 link quality trend is below the yellow threshold and decreasing rapidly. This forces diagnosis before action.
Second, confirm the mode or intent you want.
They have to state the desired outcome and the command clearly. Confirming transition to hold mode, new target altitude 2,000 feet. This ensures the coordinator hasn't issued a conflicting or an impossible command in the heat of the moment.
And the third C is commit the action.
This is the critical final step of verifying that the command actually took hold and the expected result is being achieved. Commit. Hold command accepted. Aircraft is stabilizing altitude at 2,000 feet.
And if the system doesn't confirm?
If the system doesn't confirm receipt or execution, the coordinator knows immediately that the command failed, and they must execute the hard override or the discontinuance procedure. This discipline process replaces chaotic, rapid-fire inputs with calm, deliberate action.
Okay, layer 3, organizational governance. We've stressed that automation failures often originate organizationally, not mechanically. The operations supervisor is the key player here. So what are the organizational non-negotiables required to support safe L4 operations?
The single most important is robust software and update governance. Since systemic risk, that fleet coupling, is such a threat, updates have to follow a defined safety-critical process.
What does that process look like?
Rigorous testing in a simulator, then staging the update on a small test fleet, then a phased deployment to the operational fleet, and finally, continuous monitoring post-deployment. The operations supervisor has to sign off on every single stage.
Failure to adhere to that change control is a direct violation of flight safety procedure.
It is, and recurrency training needs to reflect these new cognitive demands. We can't just train the happy path anymore.
What do you mean?
Recurrency training must focus almost entirely on abnormal operations management. This means simulated scenarios involving partial sensor failures, managing conflicting alerts, prioritizing intervention between two simultaneous emergencies. That's the one-many challenge.
And handling unexpected external dependencies like a sudden GPS jamming event.
Exactly. You train the diagnosis and the decision-making process, not the stick skills.
And finally, a necessary safety control for long-duration operations, the handoff.
Part 108 anticipates operations that will exceed a single shift. And a handoff is a high-risk transition point where situational awareness can be completely lost.
So best practice demands a formal handoff script.
It has to be scripted. The outgoing coordinator must transfer all of the MILHT status points, all active alerts, the history of recent commands, and crucially, the status of any active contingency states to the incoming coordinator.
Yeah.
You're not just handing over the keyboard, you are transferring a complete active mental picture of the mission's current risk posture.
All right, let's ground all of this in reality. How do these human failures and governance structures manifest in the complexities of real-world BVLOS operations? Let's look at some specific case files.
These scenarios really highlight the critical importance of the flight coordinator's judgment, even though they're only issuing these simple commands.
Okay, let's start with a common one, scenario. Lost link contingency action. The system loses its C2 link, and it begins executing its pre-programmed action, return to home, or RF each. What is the flight coordinator's critical role here?
So the automation is handling the mechanics perfectly, but the coordinator has to handle the context. Let's say the aircraft is near a temporary military training area that has just published a new NOTAM. Or maybe there's a forest fire that has created a new restricted zone right along the default RTH path.
Things the system might not know about if it's lost its data link.
Exactly. The coordinator, through their 3330 scan, should be aware of this new threat. They must rapidly intervene using those limited SUI commands to issue a safe alternative command. Something like loiter at present position, new altitude 500 feet, which stops the unsafe RTH action. Their job is overriding the predictable automation with dynamic operational intelligence.
Okay, next, the classic subtle killer scenario, silent degradation. For instance, the C2 link trending down. The MILHT status is still green, but the health graph is showing a subtle, consistent drop in navigation confidence.
This is where that training on trends, not just thresholds, really pays off. The flight coordinator recognizes that although the system is technically operational, it is collapsing toward a hard fail.
And if they wait for the hard fail?
They may lose enough link quality to prevent issuing any high-level command at all. The action has to be preemptive mitigation. Using the 3C script to call the condition, confirm a strategic change like reduce airspeed by 50%, or turn toward the primary antenna site and then commit the action.
You're proactively reducing the aircraft's complexity and stress profile to preserve the safety margin.
You have to.
Now, the true stress test of the Part 108 model. Scenario: 2 aircraft go abnormal. This is the one-many challenge. A coordinator is supervising 8 aircraft. Drone A reports a low-urgency sensor issue, maybe a redundant altimeter failure. At the same time, Drone B reports catastrophic GNSS degradation, an issue that could lead to loss of positional awareness within minutes.
The coordinator cannot handle both of these simultaneously while supervising the other 6. This requires immediate prioritization based on the time to unsafe.
And in this case, that's Drone B?
Drone B, with its rapidly degrading navigation confidence, has the lowest time to unsafe. It must receive immediate intervention. That's likely a command to execute a safe, immediate discontinuance procedure like a safe landing.
And Drone A is downgraded.
It's downgraded. And to free up cognitive capacity to deal with Drone B, the coordinator might simultaneously issue a loiter or hold position command to the 6 healthy aircraft, temporarily shrinking the operational footprint.
Scaling must degrade gracefully.
It has to. When your resources are strained, you must immediately reduce the scope of the mission to maintain safety on the most critical aircraft.
And finally, the organizational risk scenario. System coupling failure. The example is avoidance versus geofence. An aircraft is executing a tactical mission, but the obstacle avoidance system sees a pop-up threat and initiates a sharp climb. That climb immediately triggers the geofence logic, which forces a sharp descent.
And the 2 safety systems fight each other, creating uncontrolled oscillation. This is automation gone rogue. The 2 automated logics are in direct conflict, resulting in erratic, unsafe behavior.
So what's the coordinator's move?
The technical response has to be immediate. Command to hold. This is the emergency brake that shuts down all competing navigational and avoidance algorithms. Once the aircraft is stabilized and passive, the coordinator has to step in and choose a single, definitive, safe path, either a definite manual reroute using simple commands or an immediate discontinuance of the flight entirely. The human is the ultimate systems reset button.
To bring this deep dive to a close, what are the 3 critical non-negotiables that we have to lock into our minds about this proposed Part 108 world and the shift to supervised autonomy?
Okay, first is the control style. The proposed Part 108 mandates high automation and rejects joystick-style manual control. The flight coordinator interacts through SUI supervisory, simple commands only. The entire safety case hinges on the predictability and standardization of that automation.
Second, the safety requirements. Systems have to be fundamentally resilient. This means 2 things. They must have built-in guardrails to resist operation outside the flight envelope.
And they must be engineered not to lose control due to degraded external services like GNSS or C2 links. Resilience is absolutely mandatory.
And third
is the true automation bargain. You gain massive scalability through higher automation, but you pay for it with stronger organizational responsibility. This requires rigorous procedural discipline, like the 3330 scan, defined human oversight, like MILHT, and mandatory resilience to those systemic failure risks, like fleet coupling. The job is no longer flying, it is systems management and organizational safety governance.
This has been an essential dive into the future of flight safety.
Right.
We have clearly established that BVLOS at scale is fundamentally a systems problem. It's rooted in process and governance, not a piloting problem rooted in fine motor skills.
Right. Automation is the necessary engine of scalability, but it's only as safe as the structures, the training, and the explicit procedures you place around it.
We saw the core trade-off so clearly. Automation helps by drastically reducing execution error. It gives you precision and speed.
But it hurts by introducing supervision error mode confusion, systemic dependency failure, and that brittleness in edge cases.
And the new mastery is the ability to manage that trade-off. Deploying the MILHT scan, adhering to the 3330 rhythm, enforcing change control governance, that is the skill set demanded of the flight coordinator and the operations supervisor.
In this proposed world of Part 108, the highest risk human action isn't a wrong stick input, because those inputs are abstracted away. The highest risk action is the failure to maintain a clear, continuous understanding of the machine's mode, intent, and limits, a failure of situational awareness.
So here is our final provocative thought for you to chew on. If the machine is certified to handle every aspect of the flight execution flawlessly, the ultimate pilot skill is no longer controlling the aircraft, but controlling the chaos of information and the complexity of governance.
The future of flight safety rests less on how well you can fly and more on how well you can think strategically about the systems supervising the entire operation.
It's a fundamental shift in what it means to be well-informed and safe in the sky.
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.